Hi everyone, it's Mr. Trossi, and today we're going to be talking about the phases of the moon, answering this essential question, why does the moon look different sometimes? So, you may have noticed at night, or during the day sometimes, the moon looks different at different times of the year or the month. Sometimes it looks like a crescent, kind of like a banana, some like to say. Or maybe you can only see half of it, so it's like a half circle. And sometimes you can't see it at all. So we're going to talk about why that is, answering this question, why does the moon look different sometimes? Now, we know that the Earth orbits around the sun in space. And we also know that the moon does something similar. It orbits or revolves around the Earth's orbit. The Earth has a gravitational pull and orbit just like the sun does, and the moon is close enough to the Earth that it revolves in that gravitational pull, that orbit around the Earth. And because of that, we can only see parts of the moon. Now, what's causing the moon to show is the reflection of the light from the sun. And when we are positioned in relation to the moon and the sun, the light is reflecting in different spots. So let's talk about that. When we see a new moon that looks something like this, we can't see it at all. When we have a new moon, we can't see it at all because all of the light from the sun is on the opposite side of the moon from what's facing us on Earth. So we can't see the moon because there's no light being reflected from the sun. But as the moon revolves around us, slowly over time, the more and more light will show. And when we go from the new moon to the next phase, we have a waxing crescent moon. We start to see a little crescent moon as more and more light starts to reflect from the moon. And as we continue to wax, we make our way from our waxing crescent to our first quarter moon, which looks like a half moon. So you might be thinking, well, why is it called a quarter moon? We see half of the moon. Well, no, you don't. Because you got to realize that we are only seeing half of the moon at any given time. Because it is a sphere, we can only see it from one point of view at a time. So when we're looking straight at the moon, we can only see half of it at one time. And because half of the moon is shining and the other half is dark, we call it a quarter moon because a half is a quarter. All right, so this is our first quarter moon. Now, as we move further away from our new moon, we're continuing to wax. And from our first quarter moon, we come to our waxing gibbous moon. So our crescent moon is just a tiny sliver of moon showing, and our gibbous moon is a whole lot of the moon showing. Not the whole thing, not the whole side of the moon, but a big chunk of the moon is showing. It's not a perfect circle yet. We don't get to a perfect circle until we see a full moon. Now again, we're thinking that we're seeing the whole moon, but really we're only seeing half of the moon, the half that's facing us here on Earth. But we can see as much of the moon as possible from one angle when it is a full moon. Now, once we have the full moon lit up, it's grown into the full moon, now it's going to start shrinking again on its way back to becoming a new moon again. And we call this shrinking the waning moon. So as it's growing, we call it waxing, and as it's getting smaller, we call it waning. So we go from our full moon to a waning gibbous. Notice this time, the dark part is on the right instead of the left, and the shiny part is on the left instead of the right. So they've kind of flipped as we go from the waxing gibbous to the waning gibbous. Now as we move to our last quarter moon, or sometimes referred to as third quarter moon, again we see that the bright side has moved to the left side of the moon instead of the right side of the moon, because now it's going in the opposite direction. And lastly, as we make our last waning step, we have a waning crescent moon. And again, we know it's a crescent moon because we only see a tiny sliver of light reflecting off of the moon from the sun, and most of it we can no longer see. Most of it is no longer reflecting the sun's light. And then we make our way back to the new moon. Now this cycle takes about 28 days to go from new moon back to new moon. So with that in mind, it would take half of a month, or 14-ish days, to go from a new moon to a full moon, and then another half of a month to go from a full moon back to a new moon. And as we're moving from our new moon to our full moon, we are waxing. Think about waxing a car. You're making it nice and shiny. You're making it nice and bright. So when the moon is waxing, it is getting brighter. And as it's waning, it is getting darker. Maybe think Bruce Wayne. He is the night. Waning. Take that or leave that. But this process takes about 1 month. So, back to our question. Why does the moon look different sometimes? Well, as it's orbiting around the Earth, we can only see so much of the moon at one time. And its relationship between where we are on Earth, where the moon is in space, and where the sun is in space, the light reflecting from the sun back to us on Earth is showing at different points of the moon. And so that's why the moon looks different sometimes. How long does it take? About a month to go the whole way through. We've got our new moon, then our waxing crescent, our first quarter, our waxing gibbous, a full moon, a waning gibbous, a third or last quarter moon, and our waning crescent one last time before we get to our new moon. And then the cycle repeats. Hope you guys learned something today. Take it easy.